Okay, and then the last big thing I want to consider is how our respondents are approaching our survey and what might be going through their heads, not only in terms of question wording, which we just talked about, but other things that might be influencing their responding. One of the ways we can do this is to make sure that the surveys themselves are set up so people can make accurate responses. Um, and one of the ways we can do that is to avoid asking things that there really is no way for them to know, or at least to know accurately. So, for instance, one of those would be why-based questions. A lot of times people have responses to stimuli and behave in ways to them that almost happen automatically and certainly without introspection. If you were to ask somebody about those things, they would give you an answer. They would generate an answer. However, the reliability or validity of that answer would be seriously called into question because there's no way of actually knowing if they could access that information. And then a lot of times we know that they can't, right? So if you ask somebody, if you play them a piece of music and they say, why do you like that? Explain why you like that. They will give you an answer. However, that answer may not actually relate to the processes in the brain that are going on that led to that emotional feeling. And so they could give you a whole bunch of reasons why, and none of those may be the actual reason. So you really want to avoid why-based questions for that reason. The second kind of question you want to avoid are asking memory-based questions. And what I mean by that is questions where somebody would have to go into their past in order to answer the question accurately. So an example I like to think of is asking someone the last time they cried. Unfortunately, maybe for some of you listening, it could have been recently, and I'm sorry if that's the case. But for a lot of you, I'm guessing you don't really know. And you could estimate it, you could give a number, you could give a guess, but it's probably not going to be very accurate. And that's a real problem for survey research. If you were just recording and analyzing data based on somebody's guess, well, that's not really science, or at least not the kind of science that we want to do. So you really want to avoid asking people to go back into their memory to remember something. That's why so many surveys are how you feel now or your attitudes towards things currently, because we know if people go back into their memories, they're not reliable enough. They are too malleable to really get reliable and consistent and meaningful data from those kinds of questions. The other thing we want to be on the lookout for is what researchers call response sets. You have to understand that, and I'm sure you do this if you've ever taken a survey, that not all survey takers really want to take the survey. Usually, if you signed up to take something without incentive, sure, you're going to do that. But if we're offering you an incentive or some money to do something, there is a whole group of people out there who are going to still not put a lot of effort into it and not really fully engage in the survey like we might like. And so these people end up taking what we call response sets. And so one version of a response set is yay saying, or what some people call acquiescence bias. And here, people respond yes or strongly agree to each item without really reading it. You can imagine a course survey where a teacher, your student is evaluating a teacher, and the student particularly appreciates this teacher for whatever reason. Maybe they like the topic, maybe they like the teacher. And so instead of reading each question carefully, they will just say strongly agree to everything. The problem is we don't know if they've actually read the responses, read the prompts. And so one solution to catch people who are doing this is to use reverse worded items. And what we mean by reverse worded items is instead of saying this professor was outgoing, you would say this professor was introverted. If someone is yay saying, they're going to say yes to all of those things because that's their primary mode of responding. And then you're going to get confusing responses. And oftentimes you might include two of the same items, but one's reverse worded, right? So if you're going to include my professor's outgoing, somewhere later you would include my professor is introverted. And if that person says yes to both, and they've said yes to a large majority of things, then you know something's up with them. You can catch them in that yay saying, and then you can treat them appropriately, which honestly is to say, we found evidence of response set in this individual, therefore we're not going to use the data. I should also say beforehand, before you even analyze the data, you should have rules in place for doing that. You should have certain questions or a certain proportion of items that would be you would use as an operational definition for indicating or recording this kind of bias. Note here, you don't want to use not items. You don't want to say not outgoing, simply because we talked about the issues with those negative words. So you just kind of want to find the opposite word without using the word not. Another thing that people do, or you can find evidence of, is something called fence sitting, where consistently people are going to give responses in the middle of a scale. So on a scale of 1 to 5, they're going to say 3 to everything. Maybe this is because they really don't care. Maybe it's because they don't really want to think about it. There could be a whole host of reasons why somebody does this. Researchers have the ability to take away this possibility by simply removing the middle option of the scale. So instead of a 1 to 5 scale, if we remove the 3, then you have 1, 2, 3, and 4, where 1 and 2 are on the low end of the scale, 3 and 4 are on the higher end of the scale, and there is no middle. So in this case, when there's no obvious middle, the respondent will have to, in this case, they'll probably still be choosing 2 and 4, but they will have to pick which one, and that will give you a better sense of how they feel about an item. Again, you want to do this only if you think there would be evidence of fence sitting for whatever reason. Maybe it's the kind of question you're asking that people tend to not feel strongly about, or maybe they don't have well-articulated opinions. You could remove that response option to get them to one side of the scale or the other. Another thing we have to consider is that respondents are human beings, much like scientists are human beings, and because of this, we have our own biases and subjectivity that can hurt research. And when we're doing surveys, we need to consider the respondents' motivations when answering the survey items. So depending on the topic, people might want to make themselves look a certain way, perhaps instead of how they actually are. And there's several versions of this. One of them we refer to as impression management. These are all kind of related, but impression management is the idea that even on a survey that's anonymous, you want to put out a specific version of yourself. And maybe you're just like responding in a way you want to be instead of the way you actually are. So this has been a topic of conversation in the personality literature, where you might get evidence of people saying, well, I want to be extroverted even though I'm introverted, so I'm going to look like that. Or maybe they think they are, but other people don't think they are, right? So as much as you try to get an honest response, sometimes people will intentionally or unintentionally manage their impression to give an image of a certain kind of person that may not be them. The other one here, you can see socially desirable responding. This is when people respond in ways, especially to something like a controversial or socially relevant issue, in a way that they think other people would want them to respond, even if it's not how they actually respond or actually feel about it. So, imagine we're doing an in-person, a door-to-door survey on, conspiracy theories, and someone comes to your door, and let's say you're a member of a group who believes in a particular conspiracy theory, and they're asking you questions about beliefs in conspiracy theories, and, do you believe that this thing happened in some extraordinary event that's a part of a particular conspiracy theory? If you believed in the conspiracy theory, you very well may say, no, I don't believe in that. Simply because you don't want to get weird looks from the person interviewing you. You don't want to start a larger conversation, right? Or something like that. You could also get the opposite too. You could get people who, I guess you could get socially undesirable responding with people who just trying to agitate or just trying to get into a conversation, or, there's people just like to argue. You might say you believe in it just for the fun of arguing. Either way, you're not getting someone's real response there. You're getting something else. You're getting some other desire to look like you fit in or look like you're part of the mainstream, or, and I guess in some cases, like look like somebody who wants to argue. Whatever it is, those things are going to disrupt the ability to draw meaningful conclusions from your data because people aren't answering the questions honestly. They're answering the questions how they think they should be answered. And so that's a problem. How do you deal with this? Because it seems like a hard one to deal with and it's very hard to control. And it is. One of the things we can do is emphasize anonymity, sorry about that, and say, hey, your data will not be associated with your name or anything like that, so don't worry about it. Sometimes that's not enough for people. So what researchers have gone and done is create special survey items designed to catch people engaging in this sort of socially desirable responding. So you might sneak questions in there like, I don't find it particularly difficult to get along with loudmouth, obnoxious people, or I've never desired to hurt someone. These are there to catch people because in reality, it is difficult to get along with somebody who's obnoxious. And it's not an abnormal thing to wish somebody be hurt. I mean, and it doesn't have to be physically, verbally, or emotionally, whatever, but that's a normal emotion that people have to deal with. If somebody says, I strongly agree with that, like, I've never wanted to hurt somebody, or if somebody says, like, no, I get along with everybody, they're they're managing some version of their impression. They're trying to set out an image and they're not being truthful. And you can pick that up because it's honestly an unrealistic answer to say that's true of you. And so what happens is you put these questions in there, and because they're in there, you can pick up on people doing this. Again, there's an operationally defined score or a set of scores where if you respond strongly agree to a number of these items, then you're removed from the data. But that's how you would catch somebody engaging in some of these behaviors that might mess with the trustworthiness of your data.